Let me help you with that.
The CEO's daughter rejected every applicant, but fell for the poor maid. In a world divided by wealth and power, love dared to bloom between the one who had it all and the one who had nothing. She was the heiress who rejected diamonds for dust. The one girl she could never have was the only one she wanted. Before we go into details, click subscribe, like and comment where you're watching from. I would be glad to know this story goes as far as Canada, all of the United States of America, Australia, Africa, and even the United Kingdom. So let me know where you're watching from on comment section. I pray may the good God Almighty bless and preserve you all and your family. Amen. Let's begin. The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble floors of the Chen mansion, each ray of light seeming to illuminate the vast distance between dreams and reality. Victoria Chen stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows of her private study on the third floor, her silhouette perfectly framed against the Shanghai skyline. At 28, she was everything her father had groomed her to be: sharp, calculating, and utterly uncompromising. The Chen technology empire hadn't been built on sentiment, and neither would its future. "Miss Chen, the next candidate is here." Her assistant's voice crackled through the intercom, tinged with the exhaustion that came from scheduling 43 interviews in 2 weeks. Victoria didn't turn from the window. "Send them in." This was interview number 44 for the position of her personal assistant, a role that had seen 7 people come and go in the past 18 months. Victoria's standards were impossibly high, her patience impossibly thin. She needed someone who could anticipate her thoughts, match her pace, and above all, remain invisible when necessary. So far, no one had lasted more than 3 months. The door opened with a soft click, and Victoria heard the nervous shuffle of expensive shoes on marble. She turned slowly, her expression already arranged into the mask of cool assessment that had sent countless qualified candidates fleeing. But the person standing in her doorway wasn't another ambitious MBA graduate in a power suit. It was a maid. Their maid. Or rather, one of them. The Chen household employed a staff of 32. "I'm sorry," Victoria said, her voice sharp as cut glass. "There's been a mistake. I'm conducting interviews. Please send in the next candidate." The young woman didn't move. Instead, she met Victoria's gaze with eyes that held something Victoria hadn't seen in any of the previous 43 faces: genuine calm. Not the manufactured confidence of someone trying to impress, but the quiet steadiness of someone who had nothing to prove. "There's no mistake, Miss Chen," the woman said softly. Her voice carried the faint accent of rural Sichuan province, rounded vowels that spoke of rice paddies and mountain villages far from Shanghai's glittering towers. "I'm Maya Lin. I'm here for the interview." Victoria's perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose a fraction of an inch, the only sign of her surprise. "You're a maid." "I'm also a college graduate with a degree in business administration and 3 years of experience managing complex schedules and high-pressure situations," Maya replied, her posture straight but not rigid. She wore the standard grey uniform of the Chen household staff, but somehow she made it look dignified rather than diminished. "I've worked in your home for 8 months, Miss Chen. I've observed how you work, what you need, what frustrates you. I know I can do this job." For the first time in 2 weeks, Victoria actually looked, truly looked, at a candidate. Maya Lin was perhaps 25 or 26, with delicate features that might have been considered beautiful if they weren't scrubbed so clean of makeup and aspiration. Her hair was pulled back in the same practical bun all the maids wore. Her hands, clasped loosely in front of her, were the faint calluses of someone who knew hard work intimately. "Sit," Victoria said finally, gesturing to the chair across from her massive desk. Maya sat with the same unaffected grace she'd shown standing, her hands folded in her lap. Her eyes remained steady on Victoria's face. "Why?" Victoria asked, abandoning the stack of prepared interview questions on her desk. "You have a stable job here. The pay is decent. The work is relatively easy. Why would you want to make yourself a target?" "A target? That's what being my assistant means," Victoria said, leaning back in her leather chair. "Ask anyone who's held the position. I'm demanding, perfectionist, and according to several exit interviews, impossible to please. Most people last 6 weeks before they break. The longest anyone survived is 3 months. So I ask again, why?" Maya was quiet for a moment, and Victoria found herself waiting for the answer with unexpected interest. Most candidates immediately launched into rehearsed speeches about being up for the challenge or seeing it as a growth opportunity. Maya simply thought, her gaze turning inward before returning to Victoria's face. Because I didn't come to Shanghai to scrub floors forever, Maya said finally. I came to build something. To become something. And I've watched you, Miss Chen, more closely than you realize. I know you're brilliant. I know you're difficult. But I also know that beneath all that ice, you're drowning in responsibilities that no one else can see or understand. You need someone who doesn't just manage your schedule. You need someone who can read the weather in your eyes and know when to speak and when to disappear. Someone who understands that excellence isn't about ego, it's about care. The words landed in the space between them like stones dropped in still water, sending ripples through Victoria's carefully maintained composure. No one had ever spoken to her quite like this, with neither fear nor flattery, just simple, devastating honesty. You know nothing about me, Victoria said, but her voice had lost some of its edge. I know that you take your coffee black at 7 a.m. but switch to green tea by noon because the caffeine makes your hands shake during video conferences, Maya said quietly. I know that you work until 2 a.m. most nights but never turn on the overhead lights, just the desk lamp, because the brightness gives you headaches. I know that you fired 3 assistants for incompetence when really they were fired for being too cheerful in the morning when you'd barely slept. And I know that yesterday, when you thought no one was watching, you stood in the kitchen for 10 minutes just staring at your mother's photograph, and you looked more lost than anyone I've ever seen. Victoria's throat tightened. That photograph, taken 20 years ago, before cancer, before the slow dissolution of everything warm in the Chen household, lived on a small shelf in the kitchen's breakfast nook. Victoria hadn't realized anyone had ever seen her there. Who are you? Victoria whispered, and for the first time in years, the question wasn't rhetorical. I'm someone who understands what it means to hide, Maya said simply. To wear a uniform that makes you invisible. To be surrounded by people but completely alone. I see you, Miss Chen. Not the CEO's daughter, not the heir to an empire. Just you. And I think you need someone who can see that. The silence that followed was dense with things unspoken. Victoria realized her hands were gripping the arms of her chair, her knuckles white. She forced herself to relax, to breathe, to rebuild the walls that Maya's words had somehow breached. The job pays 150,000 yuan per month, Victoria said, her voice returning to its professional cadence. You'll work 6 days a week, often 12 to 14 hours a day. You'll accompany me to meetings, business dinners, international travel. You'll have access to confidential information that could destroy careers if leaked. The pressure will be relentless. The scrutiny will be worse. Are you prepared for that? Yes, Maya said without hesitation. You start Monday. 6 a.m. Don't be late. Maya stood, bowed slightly, not the deep bow of a servant, but the respectful nod of an equal, and turned to leave. Maya, Victoria called out as the young woman reached the door. Yes, Miss Chen. Why did you really come to Shanghai? What are you running from? Maya's hand paused on the door handle. When she looked back, her eyes held shadows that Victoria recognized, having seen them in her own mirror for years. The same thing you are, Miss Chen, Maya said softly. A life that was chosen for me instead of by me. A destiny written by someone else's hand. I came to Shanghai to rewrite the ending. Then she was gone, leaving Victoria alone with the sunrise and a feeling she couldn't name, something uncomfortably close to hope. Monday morning arrived with the kind of relentless punctuality that Shanghai was famous for. Maya stood outside the Chen Mansion service entrance at 5:45 a.m., dressed in the only professional clothes she owned, a simple black pencil skirt and white blouse that she'd purchased with a month's savings from a second-hand shop in Hongkou District. The fabric was slightly worn at the elbows, but it was clean and pressed, and Maya had learned long ago that dignity wasn't about what you wore but how you wore it. The head of household staff, Mrs. Ju, found her in the service corridor at 5:50 a.m., her expression caught between approval and concern. You're really doing this? Mrs. Ju asked, her weathered face creased with worry. She'd been with the Chen family for 30 years and had seen countless employees arrive with ambition and leave with broken spirits. Maya, you're a good girl. Smart. Why would you throw yourself into the fire like this? Miss Chen goes through assistants like tissue paper. Maybe she just hasn't found the right one yet, Maya replied, adjusting the simple leather portfolio she'd borrowed from her roommate. Mrs. Ju sighed, the sound of someone who'd seen this story before and knew how it ended. You have a good heart, child. That's exactly what will get you hurt in this family. The Chens don't deal in hearts anymore. They deal in quarterly reports and stock prices. Victoria Chen especially. Her father made sure of that. What happened to her? Maya asked quietly. Everyone talks about how difficult she is, but no one talks about why. Mrs. Ju's expression softened into something like sadness. That's not my story to tell. But I'll give you one piece of advice. Don't try to save her. People like Victoria Chen don't want to be saved. They want to be left alone in their perfect, cold towers. You try to warm that ice, you'll only freeze yourself. Before Maya could respond, the household intercom crackled to life. Victoria's voice, already sharp with the day's first edges, filled the corridor. Where is she? Mrs. Ju glanced at the antique clock on the wall. 5:55 a.m. She's 5 minutes early, Miss Chen. Then she should already be here. Maya squeezed Mrs. Ju's hand in thanks and headed toward the private elevator that led directly to Victoria's third-floor office suite. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but her hands were steady. She'd faced worse than demanding bosses. She'd faced hunger, loss, and the slow erasure of dreams. This was just another challenge, another wall to climb. The elevator doors opened directly into Victoria's domain, a sprawling space of glass, chrome, and carefully curated minimalism. Everything was in shades of white and grey, from the furniture to the abstract art on the walls. The only color came from the Shanghai skyline visible through the massive windows and a single jade plant on the corner of Victoria's desk, the only concession to life in this temple of efficiency. Victoria herself was already working, her fingers flying across a laptop keyboard, 3 monitors displaying different data streams, her phone buzzing with ignored notifications. She wore a charcoal grey suit that probably cost more than Maya earned in 6 months. Her hair pulled back in a sleek low bun that emphasized her sharp cheekbones and sharper eyes. She didn't look up when Maya entered. Coffee, Victoria said. Black. 2 sugars. Not the expensive beans from the pantry. I want the cheap instant from the staff kitchen. It tastes terrible, but it works faster. Maya set down her portfolio and headed for the small kitchenette adjacent to the office. As she prepared the coffee, she heard Victoria's voice behind her, still typing, still multitasking. You have 5 minutes to drink whatever you need for breakfast because you won't eat again until lunch. We have a board meeting at 8, conference calls with Tokyo and New York at 10 and 11 respectively, lunch meeting with potential investors at 12:30, facility tour at 3, and dinner with my father at 7. You'll take notes on everything, flag anything that needs follow-up, and prepare briefing documents for tomorrow's meetings before you leave tonight. Questions? Just one, Maya said, returning with the coffee and placing it precisely on the corner of Victoria's desk where a faint ring stain indicated the usual spot. Do you ever eat breakfast? Victoria's fingers paused on the keyboard. Slowly, she looked up, her dark eyes meeting Maya's with surprise and something that might have been irritation. What? Breakfast, Maya repeated calmly. You just told me I have 5 minutes to eat, but you're already 3 hours into your workday. You got here at 3 a.m., didn't you? I could tell by the security logs when I signed in. So I'm asking, when do you eat breakfast? I don't have time for. You don't have time to pass out during the board meeting either, Maya interrupted, her voice gentle but firm. Or to lose focus during the Tokyo call because your blood sugar crashed. Mrs. Ju always keeps fresh kanji and youtiao in the staff kitchen. I'm going to get you some. Black or century egg. For a long moment, Victoria simply stared at her, and Maya wondered if she just ended the shortest assistant tenure in Chen family history. Then, incredibly, Victoria's expression shifted into something that almost resembled amusement. Century egg, she said quietly. And don't do that again. Do what? Care about whether I've eaten. It's not in your job description. Neither is watching you work yourself into an early grave, Maya replied, heading back to the kitchenette. But I suspect that's going to be a significant part of this job regardless. She heard Victoria's soft exhale, not quite a laugh, but close. When Maya returned with 2 bowls of kanji, she found Victoria had cleared a small space on her desk and was actually waiting rather than continuing to work through the meal. They ate in silence, but it was a different kind of silence than Maya had expected. Not uncomfortable, just quiet, peaceful, almost. Through the windows, Shanghai was waking up, lights flickering on in distant towers, the first traces of dawn traffic beginning to flow through the streets far below. Thank you, Victoria said finally, setting down her empty bowl. Her voice was softer now, some of the sharp edges dulled. No one's done that in a long time. Done what? Brought you breakfast. Noticed I needed it. The vulnerability in those words hit Maya square in the chest. She realized that Mrs. Ju had been wrong. Victoria Chen wasn't made of ice. She was made of glass, so carefully constructed and perfectly transparent that everyone could see through her without ever really seeing her at all. I notice lots of things, Maya said quietly. That's going to be my job now. The board meeting was exactly as brutal as Maya had anticipated. 23 executives, all men except for Victoria and one other woman, sat around a massive conference table in the Chen Technology building downtown. Maya positioned herself in a chair along the wall, her tablet ready, her expression neutral. But she watched everything. She watched how Victoria's father, David Chen, sat at the head of the table like an emperor on his throne, his silver hair and cold eyes dominating the room. She watched how he spoke to Victoria with the same detached professionalism he showed everyone else. No warmth, no recognition that this was his daughter and not just another executive. She watched how Victoria's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly whenever he criticized her analysis or questioned her judgment. And she watched the way the other executives looked at Victoria, some with barely concealed resentment at her position as heir apparent, others with the careful deference shown to someone whose favor could make or break careers, and a few with something darker, hunger disguised as respect. One man in particular kept drawing Maya's attention. Jason Wu, the chief financial officer, sat 2 seats from David Chen. He was perhaps 40, handsome in the calculated way of someone who spent serious money maintaining his appearance, and his eyes kept drifting to Victoria with an intensity that made Maya's skin crawl. Victoria, your proposal to expand into AI-driven manufacturing is ambitious, Jason said during a discussion of Q4 projections. High-stress smile not quite reaching his eyes. Perhaps too ambitious. The capital expenditure alone would strain our reserves, and with the current market volatility. He paused dramatically. I wonder if this isn't more about proving something than about sound business strategy. The implication was clear. Victoria was trying too hard, reaching beyond her capabilities, acting on ego rather than expertise. Maya saw Victoria's fingers tighten around her pen, the only outward sign of anger. When Victoria spoke, her voice was perfectly controlled. The market analysis supports a 340% ROI within 3 years, Jason. Unless you have data suggesting otherwise, I'd appreciate keeping this discussion focused on facts rather than speculation about my motivations. Of course, Jason said smoothly. I simply want what's best for the company. We all do. But his eyes said something different. I want what's best for me, and you're in the way. The meeting continued for another 90 minutes. Maya took detailed notes, but more importantly, she watched the dynamics, the power plays, the subtle undermining disguised as constructive criticism. This wasn't just a company, it was a battlefield, and Victoria was fighting on multiple fronts simultaneously. When they finally returned to Victoria's office, the carefully maintained composure cracked slightly. Victoria threw her tablet onto the desk with more force than necessary and stood at the windows, her back rigid with tension. Jason Wu is sabotaging your AI initiative, Maya said quietly, organizing her notes. He's been shorting the stock in anticipation of the proposal being rejected. I recognize the pattern from my economics classes. Subtle negative framing, planting doubt without direct opposition, building a narrative of risk that others will repeat. By the time the vote happens, everyone will believe it's too dangerous to approve. Victoria turned slowly, her expression unreadable. How do you know that? The Chen family doesn't control every seat on the board, Maya said, which means financial filings are public record for the independent directors' portfolios. I checked this morning. Jason Wu opened a significant short position on Chen Technology stock 2 weeks ago, right after you announced the AI proposal internally. He's betting against you. If your initiative fails, he profits twice, once from a short position, and again by positioning himself as the voice of reason who tried to save the company from your reckless ambition. For several heartbeats, Victoria simply stared at her. Then she crossed the office in 3 strides, pulled up a chair next to Maya, and opened her own laptop. Show me. They spent the next hour analyzing Jason Wu's financial positions, trading patterns, and political maneuvering within the company. Maya pulled up public records, shareholder reports, and even Jason's social media presence, tracking meetings, relationships, and alliances. He's building a coalition, Victoria murmured, following the threads Maya had identified. He's been meeting with 4 other board members regularly. All of them have ties to Guangzhou Capital, which is our biggest competitor in the AI space. If my proposal fails, Chen Technology stays out of AI, and Guangzhou maintains market dominance. And Jason Wu probably has a consulting deal waiting with Guangzhou the moment he leaves Chen Technology, Maya added. This isn't about good business strategy. It's about corporate sabotage. Victoria leaned back in her chair, a slow smile spreading across her face, the first real smile Maya had seen from her. It transformed her face completely, softening the sharp edges, lighting up her eyes. For a moment, Maya forgot how to breathe. You've been my assistant for 4 hours, Victoria said, and you've already uncovered a conspiracy that could have destroyed everything I've been working toward. How? Maya shrugged. You hired me to notice things. I'm just doing. No, Victoria said softly, her eyes searching Maya's face with an intensity that made Maya's pulse quicken. You're doing something much more dangerous. You're making me trust you. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Maya realized they'd somehow moved closer together, their chairs nearly touching, their faces only inches apart. She could see the tiny flecks of gold in Victoria's dark eyes, could smell the subtle scent of her perfume, something expensive and understated, like jasmine and sandalwood. Would that be so terrible? Maya whispered. Having someone to trust. Victoria's expression shifted, vulnerability flickering across her features before the walls came back up. She stood abruptly, putting distance between them. Yes, she said, her voice returning to its professional clip. Because people I trust inevitably disappoint me. It's better not to start. But Maya had seen the truth in that momentary crack. Victoria Chen was terrified. Not of betrayal, but of hope. Of letting someone in and discovering that connection was still possible, that warmth could still exist in her carefully frozen world. Because if warmth was possible, then everything she'd built, every wall, every defense, every reason she'd convinced herself that isolation was strength, would crumble. And maybe, Maya realized with a flutter of something she refused to name, maybe that crumbling was exactly what Victoria needed. The rest of that first day passed in a blur of meetings, calls, and carefully orchestrated battles fought with spreadsheets and projections. Maya watched Victoria work with the kind of focused intensity usually reserved for surgeons and fighter pilots, every decision calculated, every word measured, every interaction a strategic move on an invisible board. But Maya also noticed the small things, how Victoria's shoulders tensed when her father's name appeared on the caller ID, how her voice softened almost imperceptibly when speaking to her younger brother, who called twice, both times asking for money, how she kept a photograph of her mother hidden in her desk drawer and touched it like a talisman before important decisions. By 7 p.m., when they arrived at the private restaurant where Victoria was meeting her father for dinner, Maya had a much clearer picture of the woman behind the icy reputation. Victoria Chen wasn't cold. She was protecting something warm and vulnerable beneath layers of necessary armor. Wait in the car, Victoria said as their driver pulled up to the restaurant's entrance. This dinner is private. Your father specifically requested that your assistant attend, Maya replied, checking the meeting details. He wants to evaluate my performance, apparently. Victoria's jaw clenched. Of course he does. He wants to find reasons why you're inadequate so he can fire you and replace you with someone of his choosing. Someone who'll report my every move back to him. Then I'll make sure I'm not inadequate, Maya said simply, gathering her things. Maya, Victoria said, her hand suddenly on Maya's arm, warm through the fabric of her blouse. The touch sent electricity racing up Maya's skin. My father is difficult. He'll try to intimidate you, dismiss you, undermine you. He does it to everyone. Please don't take it personally. I grew up the daughter of a pig farmer in rural Sichuan, Maya said with a slight smile. I've faced down aggressive boars bigger than me. I think I can handle one CEO. Victoria's surprised laugh was like sunlight breaking through clouds. I think you might be the most dangerous person I've ever hired. The restaurant was exactly what Maya expected. Excuse expensive and soulless. Private dining room, imported ingredients, a wine list that probably cost more than her entire year's salary as a maid. David Chen sat at the head of the table like a king granting audience. A wine list that probably cost more than her entire year's salary as a maid. David Chen sat at the head of the table like a king granting audience, his expression revealing nothing. He didn't stand when they entered. Didn't smile. Barely looked at Maya. You're late, he said to Victoria. By 2 minutes, Victoria replied, taking her seat. Traffic. Successful people don't make excuses. They make adjustments. David's eyes finally flickered to Maya, cold and assessing. So this is the maid who thinks she can run my daughter's life. I'm Victoria's assistant, Mr. Chen, Maya said calmly, remaining standing until invited to sit. And I'm here to support her work, not run her life. A maid, David repeated, as if Maya hadn't spoken. Victoria, this is beneath you. This girl is a charity case, not a professional. This girl graduated top of her class in business administration, Victoria said sharply. And in 4 hours, she uncovered a corporate sabotage plot that could have cost us millions. Which is 4 hours faster than your security team or your executive staff noticed anything wrong. So perhaps you should reconsider your definition of professional. Maya's heart swelled at Victoria's defense, even as she saw the danger in it. David Chen's expression hardened into something cruel. Don't lecture me about professionalism, Victoria. You've gone through 7 assistants in 18 months. 7. Your judgment is clearly compromised. He turned his attention fully to Maya now, his eyes like scalpels. Let me guess your story, Miss Lin. Poor family, came to Shanghai with dreams of making it big, took whatever job you could get, and now you think attaching yourself to my daughter is your ticket to success. How close am I? Not very, Maya replied, meeting his gaze without flinching. I came to Shanghai because I wanted to build something meaningful. I took a job as a maid because I believe that honest work has dignity, regardless of what form it takes. And I accepted Victoria's offer because I recognized someone brilliant who's being undermined by people who should be supporting her, including, with respect, her own father. The silence that followed was absolute. Victoria's eyes widened in shock. The server, who had been approaching with menus, quietly retreated. David Chen's expression was unreadable. Then, slowly, he smiled, but it was the smile of a shark scenting blood. You have courage. I'll give you that. Stupidity too, but courage. Let me make something clear, Miss Lin. My daughter is being groomed to lead an empire. That requires discipline, sacrifice, and the willingness to make hard decisions. It doesn't require, he waved his hand dismissively at Maya, emotional attachments or sentimental distractions. Victoria has tried the warmth and friendship approach with her previous assistants. It always ends in betrayal or disappointment. I'm teaching her the most important lesson in business. Trust no one completely, need no one absolutely. Can you provide that lesson? Or will you just be another weakness for her to overcome? Maya felt Victoria tense beside her, saw the way her hands clenched under the table. This was the wound, she realized. This was why Victoria had built her wall so high. Her father had systematically trained her to see connection as weakness, compassion as vulnerability. Mr. Chen, Maya said quietly, with respect, that's the most heartbreaking thing I've ever heard. You've taught your daughter to survive, but not to live. To win, but never to be happy. And you call that success. I call that reality, David Chen said coldly. The world doesn't care about your happiness. It cares about your results. Victoria understands that. Don't you, daughter? Maya watched Victoria's face, saw the years of conditioning warring with something else, something that wanted to scream no, I don't understand, I don't want to understand, I want something different. But in the end, training won. Yes, father, Victoria said, her voice empty. I understand. Good. Then understand this too. Your new assistant is on probation. One mistake, one hint of impropriety or incompetence, and she's gone. And Victoria, if I find out that you're developing any kind of emotional attachment to your staff, we'll have a serious conversation about your readiness to lead this company. Are we clear? Crystal, Victoria replied, her voice like ice over deep water. The dinner continued in painful civility, David Chen holding court while Victoria grew quieter and more withdrawn. Maya watched the light slowly die in Victoria's eyes, watched her retreat back into the armored shell that her father had built for her. By the time they returned to the car, Victoria was completely shut down. She stared out the window at the passing lights of Shanghai, her reflection ghost-like in the glass. You shouldn't have done that, Victoria said finally. What you said to my father. You put a target on your back. He'd already put one there the moment he learned I used to be a maid, Maya replied. At least now he knows I'm not afraid of him. You should be. He's destroyed people for less. Is that what happened to your mother? He destroyed her spirit until there was nothing left. Victoria's head snapped around, her eyes blazing. Don't you dare talk about her. Why not? Because it's true. Because you're terrified of ending up exactly like her, brilliant and passionate and slowly crushed under the weight of expectations and isolation until you just gave up. Get out, Victoria said, her voice shaking. Get out of the car. You're fired. No, I'm not, Maya said calmly. Because you don't want to fire me. You want to push me away before I get close enough to matter. Before you care what I think. Before my opinion of you becomes something you can't control. But it's too late, Victoria. I already see you. And you can't fire me for that. I can fire you for insubordination. Then do it. The silence stretched between them, taut as a wire. The car continued through the Shanghai night, the driver carefully pretending not to hear anything. Victoria's hands trembled slightly where they gripped the seat leather. Why? Victoria whispered finally, and her voice cracked on the word. Why would you want this? This job, this life, dealing with my father's cruelty and my impossible standards and the constant threat of being collateral damage in corporate warfare? You could do anything, be anything. Why choose this? Maya reached across the space between them and took Victoria's hand. She felt Victoria's sharp intake of breath, the way her fingers instinctively curled around Maya's like a drowning person grabbing a lifeline. Because the first time I saw you, Maya said softly, you were standing in the kitchen at 2 a.m., crying in front of your mother's photograph. You didn't know I was there. I'd come down for water. And I watched you whisper, I'm sorry, Mama. I'm so sorry I couldn't be what you wanted me to be. And then you wiped your tears, straightened your shoulders, and went back upstairs to work for 3 more hours. That's when I knew. Knew what? That underneath all the ice and armor, you're the bravest, most heartbreaking person I've ever met. And that maybe, just maybe, you need someone in your corner who isn't afraid of your walls. Someone who can see the woman you're trying so hard to hide and tell you, she's worth fighting for. She's worth saving. Victoria's breath hitched. A single tear traced down her cheek, catching the lights of the city. You can't save me, Maya. I'm too far gone. My father made sure of that. I don't want to save you, Maya said, squeezing Victoria's hand gently. I want to stand beside you while you save yourself. There's a difference. For a long moment, Victoria just looked at their joined hands, at the impossible bridge being built between their two worlds. When she spoke again, her voice was barely audible. Don't let go. I won't. Promise me. No matter how hard I push you away, no matter how cruel I get when I'm scared, promise me you won't let go. I promise. Victoria nodded slowly, her thumb brushing across Maya's knuckles in a gesture so tender it made Maya's chest ache. They stayed like that for the rest of the drive, hands linked in the darkness, two souls recognizing each other across an impossible distance, neither knowing yet what they were building but both suddenly, terrifyingly aware that everything had changed. When they pulled up to the Chen mansion, Victoria reluctantly released Maya's hand. Tomorrow, 6 a.m. We have a war to plan. Against Jason Wu. Against everyone who thinks I'm too soft, too emotional, too weak to lead. Victoria's eyes hardened with new determination, but there was something else there now too, a spark that hadn't existed before. We are going to destroy his credibility so thoroughly that the board will beg me to approve the AI initiative. And then we are going to build something my father never thought I could, a company that's successful and humane, profitable and compassionate. Is that naive? It's revolutionary, Maya said with a smile. I'm in. Good. Because you just became the most important person in my life, Maya Lin. And that terrifies me more than any corporate battle ever could. Then Victoria was gone, striding into the mansion with renewed purpose. Maya watched her go, her hands still warm from Victoria's touch, her heart racing with something she'd sworn she wouldn't feel. Mrs. Ju found her in the service entrance, still standing there like a statue. Well, I think, Maya said slowly, I just fell into something much deeper and more complicated than a job. Mrs. Ju sighed, but her eyes were kind. I tried to warn you, child. The Chens are a storm, and Victoria is the eye, calm and beautiful and absolutely capable of destroying everything around her. Maybe, Maya agreed. Or maybe she's just been waiting for someone willing to weather the storm with her. And you think you're that someone? Maya thought about Victoria's tears, about the vulnerability hidden beneath layers of armor, about the desperate way she'd said, "Don't let go." "I think I'm going to try to be," Maya said softly, "even if it destroys me." The next 3 weeks passed in a whirlwind of strategic planning, careful maneuvering, and long hours that bled into longer nights. Maya and Victoria fell into a rhythm that felt almost choreographed, anticipating needs, finishing sentences, communicating with glances across crowded boardrooms. They built their case against Jason Wu piece by piece, documented meetings with Guangzhou Capital representatives, traced financial transactions that suggested kickbacks, analyzed his voting patterns against Victoria's initiatives. But more than that, they built something else, a partnership that started as professional and slowly, inevitably, shifted into something neither was willing to name. It happened in small moments, Victoria's hand lingering on Maya's shoulder when reviewing documents, Maya staying until 3 a.m. not because she had to but because leaving Victoria alone felt impossible, the way their eyes found each other in rooms full of people like compass needles seeking north. "You should go home," Victoria said one night, the clock reading 1:47 a.m. They were in Victoria's home office, papers scattered across every surface, empty coffee cups forming a graveyard of productivity on the desk. "So should you," Maya replied, not looking up from the financial report she was analyzing. "This is your home." "This is my prison," Victoria corrected softly. "Home is supposed to feel warm." Maya did look up then, her eyes finding Victoria's across the cluttered desk. "When's the last time anything felt warm to you?" Victoria was quiet for a long moment, her gaze dropping to her hands. "My mother's funeral. 14 years ago. I was 14. My father told me crying was weakness, that I needed to be strong for the family. So I stopped crying, stopped feeling, stopped being warm. And now I don't." The board meeting where everything came to a head arrived on a Tuesday morning in late November. The conference room was packed, all 23 board members, plus legal counsel, plus representatives from major shareholders. Maya sat in her usual position along the wall, her tablet ready, her heart hammering against her ribs. Victoria stood at the head of the table, composed and lethal in a deep navy suit that made her look like a warrior preparing for battle. For 3 weeks, they'd gathered evidence, built alliances, and prepared for this moment. Now everything hung in the balance. "Before we vote on my AI initiative," Victoria began, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd finally stopped apologizing for taking up space, "I believe the board should be aware of certain irregularities that have come to light." Jason Wu's confident smile flickered slightly. 3 weeks ago, my assistant discovered that several board members have been engaged in activities that constitute corporate sabotage and conflicts of interest. Victoria nodded to Maya, who stood and distributed folders to each board member. "Inside, you'll find documented evidence of secret meetings with Guangzhou Capital, financial transactions that suggest kickbacks and insider trading, and communication records that prove a coordinated effort to undermine Chen Technologies' competitive position in the AI market." The room erupted. Jason Wu's face drained of color as board members flipped through the documents. David Chen sat motionless at the head of the table, his expression unreadable, his eyes fixed on his daughter with an intensity Maya couldn't interpret. "This is preposterous." Jason stood abruptly. "These allegations are documented, verified, and already submitted to the Securities Regulatory Commission," Victoria continued calmly. "Mr. Wu, you and 3 other board members have 30 minutes to submit your resignations before this becomes a criminal matter. The evidence is irrefutable." Maya watched as 3 men, powerful executives who'd spent months undermining Victoria, quietly gathered their things and left the room, their faces ashen. Jason Wu stood frozen, his empire crumbling around him in real time. "You've destroyed me," he said, his voice hollow. "No," Victoria replied, and there was no triumph in her voice, only weary finality. "You destroyed yourself. I just refuse to be destroyed with you." After Jason and his allies left, the remaining board members sat in stunned silence. Finally, David Chen spoke, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "Well played, Victoria. Ruthless, strategic, and perfectly executed. Perhaps I was wrong about your readiness to lead." He paused, his eyes flickering to Maya with something that might have been grudging respect. "And perhaps I was wrong about your assistant being a distraction. Miss Lin, that was impressive work." Maya inclined her head slightly but said nothing. She was watching Victoria, Seeing the way her shoulders remained tense despite her father's praise, the way her jaw was still clenched with unspoken words. However, David continued, this changes nothing about succession planning. You've proven you can fight battles, Victoria. But can you make the sacrifices necessary to win wars? Can you remain objective when personal feelings threaten to compromise judgment? Victoria's eyes met Maya's across the room, and in that moment, something shifted. Maya saw the decision form in Victoria's expression, saw her finally choose something for herself rather than for the empire, for duty, for her father's approval. You know what, father? Victoria said quietly, and the room went absolutely still. I don't know if I can remain objective. Because I've learned something these past 3 weeks that you never taught me. Connection isn't weakness. Caring about people doesn't make me vulnerable. It makes me human. And maybe, just maybe, this company would be better led by someone who remembers what humanity looks like. David Chen's expression hardened. Don't be foolish, Victoria. You're emotional because you've been working too hard. Take a few days off, clear your head. I'm not taking a few days off, father. I'm taking control of my own life. Victoria's voice was steady now, certain. I'll continue leading the AI initiative because I believe in it. I'll continue working to make Chen technology profitable and ethical. But I won't do it by becoming the kind of person who sees people as resources to be used and discarded. I won't do it by cutting myself off from every human connection. And I won't do it by sacrificing my chance at happiness on the altar of your definition of success. She turned to face the full board, her posture straight, her voice clear. The AI initiative vote will proceed as scheduled. And when it passes, not if, when, I want it on record that this company is changing direction. We will be ruthless with our competition but compassionate with our people. We will chase excellence but not at the cost of ethics. We will build an empire. The vote was 17 in favor, 3 abstentions. The AI initiative passed overwhelmingly. As board members filed out, offering congratulations and already repositioning themselves in Victoria's new political landscape, David Chen approached his daughter. Maya tensed, ready to intervene if necessary, but Victoria gave her a subtle shake of her head. You've disappointed me, David said quietly. No, father, Victoria replied, and there was sadness in her voice but also freedom. I've disappointed you before, every time I showed emotion, every time I wanted your approval instead of your respect, every time I cried for Mama. This is the first time I've disappointed you by choosing myself, and I'll live with that. David Chen studied his daughter for a long moment, and Maya saw something complicated pass across his face. Maybe respect, maybe loss, maybe the ghost of a man who'd once known how to love before ambition had consumed everything else. Your mother would have been proud, he said finally, so quietly that Maya almost didn't hear it. She always said you had her fire. I tried to temper it, control it, redirect it into something useful. But maybe. He trailed off, unable or unwilling to finish the thought. Then he left, and Victoria stood alone in the conference room, trembling slightly now that the adrenaline was fading. Maya crossed to her in 3 quick steps and pulled her into a fierce embrace. Victoria stiffened for just a moment, surprised, uncertain, and then melted into the contact like someone who'd been cold for so long they'd forgotten what warmth felt like. You did it, Maya whispered into Victoria's hair. You were magnificent. I'm terrified, Victoria admitted, her voice muffled against Maya's shoulder. I just burned bridges I can never rebuild. I defied my father in front of the entire board. I've changed everything, and I don't know if I'm strong enough to handle the fallout. You're not alone anymore, Maya said, pulling back just enough to look into Victoria's eyes. That's the whole point. You don't have to be strong enough by yourself. Victoria's eyes were bright with unshed tears, her careful makeup finally showing cracks. Maya, I need to tell you something. These past 3 weeks, working with you, talking with you, just being with you. It's been the first time in 14 years that I've felt like I could breathe. Like I was more than just my father's daughter or the company's future CEO. You make me feel human again. And she stopped, fear flickering across her face. Say it, Maya encouraged gently, her hands coming up to frame Victoria's face. Whatever it is, say it. I'm falling in love with you, Victoria whispered, the words tumbling out like a confession. And it terrifies me because I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be vulnerable without being weak. I don't know how to let someone in without giving them the power to destroy me. I don't know. Maya stopped her spiral the only way she could think of. She kissed her. It was gentle and fierce all at once, a question and an answer, a promise and a plea. Victoria gasped against Maya's lips, then kissed her back with 14 years of repressed longing, of denied softness, of carefully buried hope finally breaking free. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Victoria's tears were flowing freely now, tracking mascara down her cheeks, making her look beautifully, perfectly human. I don't have any money, Maya said, breathless and honest. I'm still just a girl from rural Sichuan who got lucky. I can't give you grand gestures or expensive gifts or the kind of life you're used to. All I can give you is this: I'll see you. Every day, through every battle, through every moment of doubt and fear and triumph. I'll see the woman you are underneath all the armor. And I'll love her, not the CEO, not the heiress, just Victoria. Just you. Is that enough? Victoria laughed through her tears, the sound pure and joyful and free. It's everything. It's more than I ever dared to hope for. They kissed again, softer this time, taking their time, learning the shape of this new territory they were mapping together. Outside the conference room windows, Shanghai stretched out in all directions. Millions of people, thousands of stories, countless dreams being built and broken and rebuilt. But in that moment, their world narrowed to just this: two women who'd found each other across impossible distances, who'd chosen connection over isolation, love over fear, warmth over the cold perfection that had nearly destroyed them both. 6 months later, Maya stood in what used to be Victoria's cold, minimalist office and marveled at how much had changed. Plants now crowded the windows. Victoria had discovered a passion for gardening, of all things. Photographs lined one wall, Victoria and Maya hiking in Yunnan province, both of them laughing and muddy, the Chen technology team celebrating the successful AI product launch, Victoria and her father at lunch, both smiling tentatively, rebuilding something that had been broken for too long. The jade plant that had been the only living thing in the old office had multiplied. Victoria now gave cuttings to every new employee, along with a speech about growth, patience, and the importance of tending to things carefully. The company was thriving. The AI initiative had exceeded every projection, making Chen Technology the industry leader and proving that ethical business practices and profitability weren't mutually exclusive. Victoria had implemented new policies: mental health support for all employees, flexible work arrangements, profit-sharing programs that ensured everyone benefited from the company's success. And Victoria herself had transformed. She still worked hard, that drive would never disappear, but she also took weekends off. She laughed more. She'd reconnected with a younger brother, who was getting his life together with Victoria's support rather than her judgment. She'd even started painting, creating abstract works that hung in their shared apartment, beautiful explosions of color that spoke of a soul finally free to express itself. Their apartment. That still made Maya smile. 6 months ago, Victoria had shown up at Maya's tiny shared room in the staff quarters with a simple proposal: move in with me. Not because it's practical or makes sense for work, but because I wake up every morning wishing you were there. Because I want to have breakfast with you and argue about what to watch on TV and fall asleep next to you every night. What do you say? Maya had said yes without hesitation. David Chen had struggled with it at first, not the relationship itself, surprisingly, but the speed of it, the public nature of it, the way Victoria refused to hide or downplay what Maya meant to her. But slowly, grudgingly, he'd come around. Maybe seeing his daughter happy, genuinely, radiantly happy, had reminded him of the wife he'd lost, the warmth he'd systematically eliminated from his life in pursuit of success. At their last family dinner, David had actually asked Maya about her family, her history, her dreams. It was stilted and awkward, but it was a start. Penny for your thoughts. Victoria's voice came from the doorway, and Maya turned to find her partner leaning against the frame, wearing jeans and a casual blouse instead of her usual armor of power suits. They were heading to the park, a Saturday afternoon tradition they developed, just walking and talking and being together without agendas or schedules. Just thinking about how far we've come, Maya said, crossing the office to take Victoria's hand. It still sent electricity through her every time they touched, that spark of connection that had only grown stronger with time. Any regrets? Victoria asked, pulling Maya close. Not even one. You. Victoria pretended to think about it, her eyes dancing with amusement. Well, you do steal all the blankets. And you're terrible at folding laundry. And you insist on watching those ridiculous romantic comedies that make me cry. You love those movies, Maya accused. I love how you look watching those movies, Victoria corrected. That soft expression you get, like you still believe in happy endings despite everything. I do believe in happy endings, Maya said seriously. Because I'm living one. Victoria's expression melted into something tender and awed. How do you do that? How do you make me feel like the luckiest person in the world with just a few words? Practice, Maya teased. I've had 6 months to perfect my technique. They kissed, gentle and familiar, the kind of kiss that spoke of coming home after a long journey. When they broke apart, Victoria rested her forehead against Maya's, their breaths mingling in the small space between them. Thank you, Victoria whispered. For what? For seeing me when I was invisible. For staying when I tried to push you away. For teaching me that strength doesn't mean being alone. For loving me when I barely knew how to love myself. Victoria pulled back just enough to meet Maya's eyes. You saved my life, Maya Lin. No, Maya said firmly, echoing the words she'd spoken months ago in a car on a dark Shanghai night. You saved yourself. I just stood beside you while you did it. Then stand beside me for the rest of it, Victoria said, and suddenly she was pulling a small velvet box from a pocket, dropping to one knee right there in the office, her eyes bright with hope and fear and love. Stand beside me forever. Marry me, Maya. Build this crazy, beautiful, impossible life with me. Say yes to weekends in the park and terrible laundry folding and stealing all the blankets. Say yes to fighting battles together and celebrating victories together and facing whatever comes next together. Say yes to. Yes, Maya interrupted, laughing and crying simultaneously, pulling Victoria to her feet and into her arms. Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes. The ring was simple, a single diamond surrounded by jade, representing the two of them, the brilliant clarity Victoria brought to everything she did, surrounded by the steady, grounded warmth that Maya offered. It fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting for Maya's finger all along. They stood there, holding each other in the office that had once been a temple of isolation and was now filled with life and light. Two women who'd found each other against impossible odds and chosen to build something beautiful from the ruins of loneliness. Outside, Shanghai continued its relentless march forward, building, growing, transforming. But inside, time seemed to slow, to breathe, to make space for two hearts that had finally found their home in each other. Mrs. Ju, passing by the office on her way to deliver some documents, paused in the doorway and smiled. She'd watched Maya arrive at the Chen mansion 8 months ago, full of determination and hope. She'd watched Victoria slowly thaw under Maya's patient care. And now she was watching something she'd never thought she'd see, a Chen who'd learned that love wasn't weakness, that vulnerability wasn't defeat, that letting someone in wasn't the end of strength but the beginning of something much more powerful. About time, Mrs. Ju murmured to herself, quietly closing the office door to give them privacy. About time. 1 year later. The wedding was small and perfect, held in the Chen family's private garden, the same garden where Victoria's mother had once grown roses and taught her daughter about patience and beauty and the importance of tending to delicate things with care. David Chen walked Victoria down the aisle, and when he placed her hand in Maya's, he whispered something that made Victoria's eyes shine with tears. Your mother would have loved her. She would have loved seeing you this happy. Maya's parents had traveled from Sichuan province, her father weathered and proud in a suit he'd purchased specifically for the occasion, her mother crying from the moment the ceremony began. They'd been worried when Maya first told them about Victoria, worried about class differences, worried about the Chen family's power, worried about their daughter getting hurt. But one weekend visit had changed everything. Victoria had helped Maya's father repair a fence, getting muddy and laughing when she hammered her thumb instead of the nail. She'd learned to make Maya's mother's famous dumplings, sitting at the kitchen table for hours, listening to stories about Maya's childhood. And at the end of the visit, Maya's father had pulled Victoria aside and said simply, "You take care of my daughter." "With my life," Victoria had promised. Now, as they exchanged vows they'd written themselves, the garden filled with friends and family who'd watched their love story unfold, Maya couldn't stop smiling. "I promise to see you," Victoria said, her voice steady despite her tears. "To really see you, every day, the way you saw me when I'd forgotten how to see myself. I promise to be brave enough to be vulnerable, to stay open even when it's scary, to choose us even when it would be easier to retreat. I promise to build a life with you that's warm and real and messier than any spreadsheet could project. I promise to love you, not just today, not just when it's easy, but every day, through every challenge, for the rest of our lives. Maya's vows were simpler but no less powerful. I promise to stand beside you while you become everything you're meant to be. I promise to call you out when you're being too hard on yourself, to remind you to eat breakfast, and to steal all the blankets unapologetically. I promise to be your safe place, your partner, your home. I promise to love every version of you, the CEO, the woman, the dreamer you're still learning to be. Today, tomorrow, always. When they kissed, the garden erupted in applause and cheers. Victoria's younger brother Wolf whistled. Mrs. Ju dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. And David Chen, standing beside Maya's parents, allowed himself a small smile, the first genuine smile many had seen from him in years. The reception was everything Victoria's corporate events were not: warm, chaotic, filled with laughter and terrible dancing and toasts that went on too long and were absolutely perfect. Victoria slow danced with Maya under strings of lights as the sun set, and whispered into her wife's ear, "Thank you for teaching me how to live." "Thank you for being brave enough to learn," Maya whispered back. They stayed that way for a long time, swaying to music, holding each other, marveling at the miracle of finding each other in a city of 25 million people, across the vast distance between boardrooms and servants' quarters, between expectations and dreams. Later that night, back in their apartment, their home, they stood on the balcony looking out at Shanghai's glittering skyline. Victoria wore Maya's favorite old t-shirt instead of designer clothes. Her hair was loose around her shoulders. Her feet were bare. She looked nothing like the icy CEO who'd rejected 43 applicants before finding the one person who could crack her armor. She looked happy. She looked free. She looked loved. "What are you thinking?" Maya asked, wrapping her arms around Victoria from behind. "I'm thinking about the woman I was a year ago," Victoria said softly. "So certain that love was weakness, that connection was vulnerability, that the only way to survive was to freeze myself solid and never let anyone in. And I'm thinking about how wrong I was. How close I came to spending my entire life in that prison I'd built." "But you didn't," Maya reminded her. "You chose something different." "No," Victoria corrected, turning in Maya's arms to face her wife. Her wife, that word still sent shivers through her. "We chose something different. You chose to see me. I chose to let you. And together we chose this. Love, partnership, warmth. All the things my father said would make me weak." "And?" Maya prompted, knowing there was more. "And he was wrong," Victoria said with quiet conviction. "Loving you doesn't make me weak. It makes me powerful in ways I never understood before. Because now I have something worth fighting for that isn't just market share or quarterly profits or my father's approval. I have you. I have us. I have a reason to come home at the end of the day that has nothing to do with duty and everything to do with joy." Maya kissed her softly, tasting salt from happy tears on Victoria's lips. "I love you. I love you too. Thank you for rejecting the life you were supposed to have and building this one with me instead." "Best decision I ever made," Maya said with absolute certainty. "Well, that and bringing you breakfast that first day. I think the century egg kanji really sealed the deal." Victoria laughed, the sound pure and bright and everything it had never been before Maya entered her life. They went inside, to the home they'd made together, messy and lived in and filled with proof that love was real, that warmth could exist even in the coldest hours, that two people from impossible different worlds could find each other and choose to stay. On Victoria's desk, the jade plant she'd given Maya on their 6-month anniversary had sprouted 3 new leaves, growing, thriving, proof that with patience and care and love, even the most unlikely things could flourish. And in the photograph that held pride of place on their mantel, taken at their wedding, Victoria and Maya laughing mid-kiss, joy radiating from every pixel, you could see what neither of them had believed possible a year ago: two souls, finally, blessedly home. This story of Victoria and Maya is a testament to the transformative power of love, the courage it takes to be vulnerable, and the beauty of choosing connection over isolation. From a chance interview to a lifetime partnership, they prove that sometimes the person who changes your life forever is the one you never saw coming, and that the greatest strength isn't in standing alone, but in finding someone worthy of standing beside. Thank you for taking your time listening. I pray God bless you all. Please don't forget to like, comments, and subscribe.